The smoke rose from her kitchen like prayers no one answered. In 1886, a woman cooked for dusty cowboys to survive. One watched her in silence. He owned everything but could not find the words.
Welcome to Shadow of the West. Subscribe and ring the bell for more legendary tales of love, courage, and the untamed frontier.
There is a kind of hunger that food cannot fill, not the hunger of empty stomachs, not the hunger of long winters without bread, but the hunger of lonely hearts, of souls that have forgotten what warmth feels like, of people who move through days like ghosts, alive but not living. This is that hunger, and this is the story of two people who fed each other in ways neither expected, one with meals served on tin plates, the other with a love he was too afraid to speak. The year was 1886. The place was a sprawling cattle ranch in the Montana Territory, a land where the skies stretched so wide it made men feel small, where the mountains stood silent in the distance like witnesses to everything, where the wind never stopped whispering, and the work never stopped demanding. The ranch was called Broken Creek, not because anything was broken, but because a creek ran through the property that split into two directions. One branch ran east toward town, the other ran west toward nothing. Just endless prairie, and the kind of silence that could drive a man mad. 12,000 acres of grazing land, 3,000 head of cattle, 15 ranch hands who worked from dawn until their bodies gave out, and one owner who worked harder than all of them combined. His name was Elijah Stone. He was 33 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, hands that had known nothing but work since he was old enough to walk. His father had built this ranch from nothing. His mother had died giving birth to him, and his father had followed when Elijah was 19. Fever took him in the winter, left Elijah alone with an empire he never asked for. For 14 years, Elijah had run Broken Creek alone, not alone in body. He had workers, he had foremen, he had neighbors who respected him, but alone in spirit, alone in the deep quiet way that comes from having no one to share your thoughts with, no one to sit beside at the end of a hard day, no one to ask how you are and actually want to know the answer. He was the richest man in the territory, and the loneliest. The other ranch hands did not know this. They saw him as one of them. He dressed like them, worked like them, ate with them, slept in a simple cabin not much bigger than theirs. He never wore fine clothes, never went to town for fancy dinners, never acted like a man who owned everything as far as the eye could see. Most of the new workers did not even know he was the owner. They thought he was just another cowboy, just another quiet man who showed up, did his work, and said little, and Elijah never corrected them. He preferred it that way, preferred being invisible, preferred being judged for his work rather than his wealth. But all of that was about to change. It was a morning in late spring when she arrived. The old cook had left 2 weeks prior, gone east to be with family, and 15 hungry cowboys were taking turns making meals that none of them could stomach. Burned beans, raw biscuits, coffee that tasted like mud, mixed with regret. The foreman, a grizzled man named Hector, had put out word in town. Cook needed. Room and board provided, fair wages. No questions asked. She came on a Wednesday, riding in the back of a supply wagon, carrying one small bag that held everything she owned in the world. Her name was Nora Callahan. She was 28 years old. Her hair was the color of chestnuts, pulled back in a simple knot. Her dress was clean, but worn thin from years of washing. Her face was tired, but her eyes were sharp, green like spring grass, watchful, guarded, the eyes of someone who had learned not to trust too easily. She had come from Missouri originally, married at 18 to a man who promised her a better life. He brought her west, bought a small farm, and then died of cholera 2 years later, leaving her with nothing but debt and a broken dream. For 6 years she had survived alone, cooking in hotels, washing clothes, taking whatever work would keep her fed, moving from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. never letting anyone close enough to hurt her. She had come to Broken Creek for a job. Nothing more, nothing less. A place to work, a roof over her head, enough money to save for whatever came next. She did not come looking for love. She had stopped believing in love years ago. Hector met her at the wagon, showed her the kitchen, a small building attached to the main bunkhouse, cast iron stove, rough wooden counters, shelves lined with supplies, everything she needed. You cook 3 meals a day, Hector said. Breakfast at dawn, lunch at noon, dinner at sunset. 15 men. They are not picky. Just make it hot, and make it plenty. Nora nodded. She had cooked for more with less. This would be easy. Hector paused at the door. One more thing, he said. The men are rough but respectful. Anyone gives you trouble, you come to me. She had handled trouble before. She would handle it again if needed. That first night she served stew. Simple but good. Chunks of beef swimming in rich gravy. Potatoes soft enough to melt. Bread still warm from the oven. The Cowboys ate like they had never tasted food before. They praised her, thanked her. One young hand named Billy said it was the best meal he had eaten in 3 years. Nora accepted the compliments quietly. This was work, nothing more. He sat at the far end of the long wooden table. A man with dark hair touched with early gray at the temples. A face weathered by sun and wind, but still handsome in a rugged, quiet way. He ate slowly, deliberately, and when he was finished, he simply nodded at her once before leaving. No words, no smile, just a nod. That is just Eli. He does not talk much, been here longer than anyone, keeps to himself mostly. Good worker though. Best with horses. Nora nodded and thought nothing more of it. Spring became summer. The ranch hummed with activity. Cattle to move, fences to mend, horses to break. And through it all, Nora cooked. She woke before dawn to start breakfast. She worked through the morning preparing lunch. She spent afternoons baking bread and preparing dinner. And by the time the sun set and the dishes were washed, she fell into her small bed, exhausted. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from honest work, the kind that kept darker thoughts at bay. The Cowboys grew to love her. Not romantically, but with the deep appreciation of men who had gone too long without someone caring for them. She remembered how each one liked his coffee. She saved extra biscuits for the ones who worked hardest. She noticed when someone was sick and made soup without being asked. And slowly, without meaning to, she became the heart of Broken Creek. But it was Eli who watched her most. Every meal he sat in the same spot, ate in the same silence. And Dee watched her move through the kitchen with an attention that would have made her uncomfortable if it had been anyone else. But his watching was not threatening. It was not the hungry gaze of men who wanted things they had no right to take. It was something else, something softer, something almost sad. One evening, she found him standing outside the kitchen after everyone else had gone. The sun was setting behind the mountains, orange and pink, painted across the endless sky. "You need something?" she asked. Eli shook his head. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. First words he had ever said directly to her. "The stew was good tonight." 4 words, that was all. And then he walked away. Nora watched him go. Something stirred in her chest, something she did not want to name. The small moments accumulated like snowflakes before a storm. A nod across the table, a brief word of thanks, a moment when their eyes met, and neither looked away quite fast enough. Nora found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps, feeling a strange disappointment on the rare days when he did not appear for meals. She told herself it was nothing. He was just a cowboy. She was just a cook. There was no story here. There could be no story here, but the heart does not listen to reason. The heart wants what it wants. And Nora's heart, despite years of protection, was beginning to want again. One night, A terrible storm rolled across the valley. Rain fell in sheets. Thunder shook the buildings. Lightning cracked across the sky like the world was breaking. Nora was in the kitchen when the door burst open. It was Eli, soaked to the bone, carrying something in his arms. A lamb. Newborn. Separated from its mother in the storm. Shivering. Dying. "Do you have warm water?" he asked. His voice urgent but calm. They worked together for hours, warming the lamb, feeding it milk from a cloth, wrapping it in blankets by the stove. Their hands touched, their eyes met in the lamplight, and something unspoken passed between them. By morning, the lamb was alive, strong enough to stand, and Eli was still there, sitting across from her at the small kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee in his hands. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For helping." Most would not have bothered. Nora shrugged. It was just a lamb. Eli looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time without any walls. "It was not just a lamb to me," he said quietly. And then he left. Nora sat alone in the kitchen as the sun rose. Her hands were trembling, not from cold, but from the realization that she was feeling something she had sworn never to feel again. Summer ripened into autumn. The leaves turned gold and red. The air grew crisp, and Nora and Eli's silent connection deepened into something neither could ignore. He started finding reasons to be near the kitchen, bringing her firewood she did not ask for, fixing hinges that were not broken, asking her opinion on things that did not require opinions. And she started saving food for him, a slice of pie wrapped in cloth, extra coffee kept warm, small gestures that spoke louder than words. The other cowboys noticed. They whispered, they smiled, they made bets on when Eli would finally speak his heart. But Eli remained silent, and Nora did not understand why. What she did not know was that Eli was terrified, not of her, but of what would happen when she learned the truth. He had seen it before, women who treated him differently once they knew he was wealthy, who suddenly became interested for reasons that had nothing to do with him, who saw the land and the cattle but not the man. He wanted Nora to see him. Just him. The quiet cowboy who loved horses, who ate her stew in silence, who had saved a lamb because it reminded him that life was fragile and precious. He was afraid that if she knew the truth, she would see only the owner of Broken Creek, and the real Eli would disappear. The truth came out in the cruelest way. A man named Victor Crane arrived at the ranch one October afternoon, a businessman from back east, dressed in fine clothes, speaking in a voice too loud for the quiet of the frontier. He had come to discuss a land deal with the owner of Broken Creek, and when Hector pointed him toward Eli, the truth spilled out like water from a broken dam. "You are Elijah Stone," Crane said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "owner of the largest ranch in Montana Territory. I have heard you are worth more than the bank." Nora was carrying water from the well. She stopped, stared, and suddenly understood everything, every silent meal, every small gesture, every time he had watched her with those sad, quiet eyes. He had been hiding from her, from everyone. She did not feel joy at the revelation. She felt betrayed. That night, she did not save food for him. She did not look at him across the table. She served the meal and disappeared into the kitchen. Ellie came to her afterward, stood in the doorway, rain beginning to fall outside. "I should have told you," he said. "Yes, you should have told you." He paused. "I was afraid." "Of what?" He paused. His voice broke. "That you would see the land instead of me. That you would want what I have instead of who I am." Nora turned to face him. Her eyes were filled with tears, with anger, with something that might have been heartbreak. "I have never wanted land," she said. "I have never wanted money. I have spent my whole life being poor, and I have survived. What I wanted was honesty. What I wanted was truth. What I wanted was someone who trusted me enough not to hide." She walked past him into the rain. Eli stood alone in the kitchen, and for the first time in his life, his wealth felt like a curse. 3 days passed. Nora did her work, served her meals, but she did not look at Eli, did not speak to him. The warmth that had been building between them had frozen into silence. The ranch felt different. The Cowboys noticed. The food was still good, but something was missing. The heart had gone cold. On the fourth night, Eli did not come to dinner. He was not in the bunkhouse, not in the barn, not anywhere. Nora told herself she did not care, but her hands shook as she washed the dishes. Her heart pounded as the hours passed. It was nearly midnight when she heard the horse. She ran outside to find Eli dismounting slowly. His face was pale. His arm hung at a strange angle. The horse had thrown him. He had been riding in the dark, not paying attention, lost in thoughts of her. His shoulder was dislocated. His pride was shattered. Was shattered, sir. Nora helped him inside, sat him down, and with steady hands she pushed his shoulder back into place while he bit down on leather to keep from screaming. When it was done, they sat in silence, the fire crackling, the wind howling, outside. "I am sorry," Eli finally said. "I was a coward. I should have trusted you." Nora was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "My husband left me with nothing," she said. "I have been poor my whole life. I have been hungry. I have been alone. And I have survived. I did not come here looking for a wealthy man. I came here looking for work. And what I found was someone who saw me, who watched me like I mattered, who made me feel less alone." She paused. Her voice softened. "I do not care about your land, Elijah Stone. I never did. I cared about the quiet man who saved a lamb in a storm. I cared about the person who nodded at me when no one else noticed. I cared about you." I looked at her, his eyes glistening. "I am still that man," he whispered. "I am still that man," he whispered. "Then prove it," she said. "Stop hiding. From the world, from me, from yourself." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. And in that moment, in the small kitchen of a ranch that stretched for 12,000 acres, two broken people chose each other. They married in the spring. A simple ceremony, just them and the ranch hands who had become family. Nora did not stop cooking. She loved it. It was who she was. But now she cooked as the Lady of Broken Creek. And every night Eli sat at the same spot at the table. And every night she saved him the best portion. Years passed. They had children. 2 boys and a girl. They raised them to work hard, to be humble, to remember that wealth meant nothing without kindness. He walked into town proudly, Nora on his arm. And everyone saw what she had seen all along. Not a wealthy rancher, but a good man. Many years later, a young traveler passed through the territory. He stopped at a prosperous ranch and asked for water. An old woman met him at the well. Her hair was silver now, her face lined with years. But her eyes were still green, still sharp, still full of life. "This is a beautiful place," the traveler said. The old woman smiled. "It is. But it was not the land that made it beautiful. It was the people." She pointed to the porch where an old man sat watching the sunset. His hair was white, his hands still strong, and on his face was a peace tea had only comes from a life well lived. "That is my husband," she said. "I came here to cook for Cowboys. I did not know one of them owned everything, but what he gave me was worth more than land. He gave me a home." The traveler nodded, thanked her, and rode away with a story he would never forget. The sun set over Broken Creek. The old man reached for his wife's hand. She took it, as she had taken it 10,000 times before, and in the silence of the frontier, 2 souls who had once been starving were finally full. Some say love finds you when you stop looking. Some say fate places you exactly where you need to be. But the West knew the truth. Love is not about finding someone with everything. It is about finding someone who makes everything else disappear. She came to cook for Cowboys. He watched her in silence because he was afraid. But in the end, the meal she made fed more than bodies. They fed a lonely heart back to life.